Welcome in, Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. And Grayson, well, you've got quite a bit of visitors listed of what's going on, and Baylor going heavy in 2024 here in the coming weeks. What stands out to you? Who stands out to you in the 2024 list the most of somebody who's about ready to go?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess this is just such an interesting day because they've really focused on the 2024 class. There's a ton of visitors on campus today, and so I think you're seeing this trend at the end of May because in June there's going to be this huge surge of official visits for the 2023 class. So I think they're just trying to get a head start here with 2024. Now, you know, there's probably four guys that I would consider four-star prospects on campus. Clemens, wide receiver Freddie Dubose. I mean, this is a guy who's going to have offers from all over the country. Already has Arizona State, Arkansas, Houston, TCU, Texas type offers. Elite track athlete. Didn't get to play the entire season because of injury, and he's still a consensus top 150 player in the country, and that's because he has a 21.5 200 meter. Was in the state championships for triple jump as well as he jumped 47 feet. So he's an elite athlete, has a chance to be the best wide receiver in the state for the 2024 class. And then kind of looking at a few others, you know, on the offensive line, I think it's going to be really important for Baylor to really make a huge dent in the 2024 class on the offensive line. And the reason I say that is because while there are good prospects in the 2023 class for the offensive line in the state of Texas, it's not as talented and not as deep as the 2024 class is. So Frisco Reedy, offensive lineman Max Anderson, his brother Nate Anderson was a big-time prospect who committed to Oklahoma a few years ago. He's a Sooner right now and was a guy that Baylor recruited heavily. But Max is probably just as good, if not better, than Nate. He's bigger. He's 6'5", 275 pounds already. That was something his brother really struggled with early on during his recruitment was weight. Max is not going to have that problem. He already has offers from A&M, LSU, Michigan State, Ole Miss. But he's a guy that's built a great relationship with Eric Mateos in the early going. And he's got a really, really good friend out of Richland Hills High School, Daniel Cruz, another 2024 offensive lineman. And Baylor was his first offer actually back in April of 2021. So both of those guys are really close. They're on a visit together, which I think is a positive for Baylor. And they're two guys that are absolute priorities for the 2024 class.
So, Grayson, for those fans who don't follow recruiting closely, kind of lay out the calendar for us right now. When you're referring to visits right now, are those just guys visiting unofficially, those guys in town for a certain reason? And as far as the camps kind of go, can you kind of just set the table for the folks over what's happening now and coming up over the next several weeks?
Right. So this is 2024 class, guys. So these are all unofficial visits right now. They're not able to take official visits until next year. So the calendar turns over. So that's kind of where you're at with 2024. Camp season starts in June. So Baylor has camps pretty much every weekend in June except for the first weekend and then one at the end of July. That will be primarily for 2023 and 2024 prospects, but you also see some young guys there as well from the area and from out of state as Baylor tries to evaluate guys. And then on the Baylor side of things, which is obviously unique to every single school, Baylor has three official visits coming up in June, and that's specifically for the 2023 class. I suspect they'll probably have maybe one other one later on in the cycle, kind of maybe in December or, you know, before the second signing day. So, yeah, that's kind of where Baylor's at right now. Obviously, during the season, there'll be a lot of unofficial visitors. But, yeah, this summer, this June is going to be really important for the recruiting side of things for this Baylor program.
Grayson, your thoughts on the Saban-Fisher row yesterday?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, are you kidding me? This is just like too perfect. And to see Jimbo just so deeply hurt was honestly hilarious. I know he was saying he's done with Saban, and I know they used to be close. I guess they're not anymore. and he worked for Saban as well. So it's really interesting. I think that Saban is in a position right now where he's having to adjust to NIL, and I don't think he's liking it very much because it's allowing other schools to do what Alabama's been doing for years. And I know it's easy to recruit at Alabama. I understand they're the best program in the country, but that doesn't mean that they should be able to just walk in and just land whoever they want. I mean, it means it to a certain extent, but I just mean like people act like, oh, they just have the number one class every year because they're good. Like, no, there's things that are deeper than that go on at Alabama. And it's the same thing at A&M. You know, Texas fans are like, oh, A&M getting the number one recruiting class after going 8-4. That's ridiculous. And I'm like, Texas football has been not very good and very underperforming the last decade. And yet go look at how many top 5 classes they have had. So I just think that there's an interesting dilemma there. I think Texas and Texas A&M recruit really well. They're always going to be in the mix to have a top 10 class. But A&M did strike gold by getting the number one class. And my only thoughts on that and my only thoughts on Jimbo with getting the number one overall class is don't act like you didn't do some things NIL-wise to get there, because everyone in the country knows you did. And it's okay if you did, because it's legal now. So as long as you did it legally, it's fine. And he claims that it was legally, but for him to act like, oh, none of them have NIL deals, you know, we didn't do this at all, that's just a joke. And then, you know, getting all mad at Saban for pointing it out, I felt like that was kind of ridiculous and honestly kind of sensitive on his part.
Grayson, I'm leery of just talking NIL all the time, but I mean, it has become such a topic. And I guess I bring it up here just because we're talking about how much it's having an effect at Alabama and Texas and A&M, although, again, those were all the schools that were pretty much in those same spots before anyways, like you pointed out. But what kind of an impact, for better or worse, do you think it's had so far for Dave Aranda and Baylor football?
Yeah, you know, it kind of brings me back to that same argument. You know, you brought it up perfectly, I think. Like, Bama and A&M have always recruited well. And, you know, since Kevin Sumlin went to A&M, they've always pretty much been around that top 10 group for recruiting rankings. And I expect them to stay there. And I expect a lot of the high-end guys to go to those top schools that make up, you know, the top 10, 15 programs money-wise in the country, the ones that can really afford to give massive NIL deals. But then Baylor can kind of fit in on the other end of that, where yes, Baylor is going to do everything they can to get NIL deals for their student athletes. We've seen that. You know, Mac Rhodes has talked about, everyone's talked about, you know, they're trying to structure something that works really well and trying to make sure that everything is by the book and everything is legal, and that's great. So for Baylor, it's like, do what you can on the NIL side, but go out and win games on the football field and go develop talent and put guys in the NFL like they did this year, because that really resonates with many, many recruits who aren't just looking for, you know, a payday, that aren't just looking for a school that's going to pay a ton of money, because Baylor's not going to be that. You know, Baylor's not going to be able to go out and get these massive NIL deals for every single prospect. So I think Baylor's been very smart with it. I think there's definitely a ceiling now. It's going to be very, very hard for Baylor to ever have a top 15 class. But I do think they can easily sneak in the top 20, top 25. And I actually expect that for this 2023 class and 2024. But it's just smart, right? It's just being smart with when you use those NIL deals and being smart with building your program the right way, because whether people want to believe it or not, that does resonate with many recruits who aren't, again, just searching for NIL deals.
Grayson, men's tennis season comes to a close. They fall to Tennessee, and you know, they were up, and then here comes the Vols, and they roar back to end up winning by what was it, 4-3? I think was the final score. Like, correct me if I'm wrong there. It was, Jack. Okay, yeah, 4-3. They fall to the Vols. Great season for Michael Woodson and company. A little bit short of where they wanted to go, obviously. Landed in the Elite Eight. Your thoughts on what they did, what they accomplished, and now what's next for Baylor men's tennis?
Yeah, guys, I was honestly sick to my stomach watching the end of that match. Yeah, they did lose 4-3, but it was more so the way they lost. I don't know if y'all saw it at all, but Adrian Boiton, their best player, a top 3 player in the entire country, had just broken the Tennessee player, and he had gotten up and was serving for the win. And guys, that would have been serving for, you know, a spot in the Final Four, and he just collapsed lost that one, then lost the next 4 to end up losing his match. And that really turned the table on all the momentum that they had gained. I was shocked they lost the doubles point, because had they won that, they would have won the match as well. Didn't get that done, but singles just looked so good. And to see, Boyton, who has just had a fantastic career at Baylor, there's a chance he's back next year as well. And there's a chance a lot of the guys on the team are back next year. But to see that end up the way it did, it was hard to watch. It was really, really hard to watch. And it made me really sad for these guys, because they put in a lot of work and they were right there to getting a Final Four trip. But hey, kudos to Tennessee. They were able to grind it out and get the win. I think that stings even more because Florida lost and TCU lost. So Baylor really had a nice opportunity to potentially win a championship. But looking forward, like I said, this program's in a great spot. They could have a lot of guys returning next year. They could be a championship favorite again next year. And I think Michael Woodson's done a fantastic job. And now it's just about taking that next step, one more step. They've been right there, been a top 5 program in the last, however many years. They've just been so consistent, and now it's just reaching the top, the pinnacle. And I'm thinking next year they'll have another great opportunity to do that.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, next up, Owen Buchanan, Texags.com.